Hello, welcome back. I'm Dr. Hunter Phillips Goodman. I'm an assistant professor for community workforce and economic development at the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. And it is my honor to be with you for grant writing, a course that you're taking through the University of Arkansas Hope Texarkana. The University of Arkansas Hope Texarkana is a fantastic partner of ours, and we so value the work that you do in the community, that the college does in the community. So let's continue. In the previous video, we looked at really mission, SMART goals, partners, building on assets, identifying the needs, what falls out in all that, and what falls out is what you end up searching for in terms of grants or writing for in terms of grants. So we're going to pick up where we left off, and I have reviewed all the materials from your previous instructors. While some of what I'm going to tell you touches on some of the materials and information that you have already, I do think what I'm going to share with you is a little different and definitely complements what you have. So at the end of this course, you will have a robust combination of materials that you can use in your grant writing search. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to pick back up where we left off. So first of all, when you're thinking about grant writing, and the part where we're going to do now is we're going to talk about avoiding mission drift, some different things about picking up on your grant searches, and then we're going to go into logic models and evaluation. So those are really important parts of a grant writing process. So first of all, when you're talking about grant writing and you're doing your search, and we did the Accessing the Opportunity handout from before, it's really easy to something comes along and it looks great and it could work. Does that mean you should do it? Maybe, maybe not. There's something called mission drift with grant writing and nonprofits, and that is, do you settle for the best fit or do you hold out for the right fit, the exact right fit? And that's a call you have to make with your organization. But I will say that in a perfect world, you don't settle. You really find the right funding for the opportunity, because you could end up going off in all kinds of directions to make something work rather than having it work for what you're trying to do. And so funding should really help the effort become focused, sustainable, and productive. Focused, sustainable, and productive, or as it is there, sustainable, focused, and productive. Same difference. You should always stick to your plan and your SMART goal and let that guide you. And when you're looking at funding and you're looking at these things, you should always read the guidelines on the website, in the RFP, and the information, and don't do it at bedtime, because these things are not designed to keep you awake. Again, here's the opportunity sheet that I referred to earlier in the last video. And you want to make sure that the grant allows you, does it do what you need it to do? So what kind of things can be included, and is funding upfront or reimbursable? If it's upfront, it means you get the grant and you get the money and you can spend the money. If it's reimbursement, then you have to spend the money and then you get reimbursed. And depending on where you are in your financial situation for your organization, you may or may not be able to do that. So that's important to think about. It's also important to think about when the proposal is due and when the funds will be awarded, and the start date, how long the funding will last. For example, let's say you come across a great one-year grant, but what you're trying to do is really going to take multiple years of funding. Does that one-year grant work for you? Is that going to get you where you need to go? Or do you need to combine that one-year grant with other things? If you get the grant in October, do you actually get the money in October? Or does the money come in January, but you find out about it in October? These kinds of questions are really important because they dictate how you do what you need to do. And if the funding looks great, but it may not fit your need, it's okay to walk away. You've got to find the right thing that supports you. And you have to be able to make a strong case. Just because it's great funding, just because it feels like it's the right thing to do, you have to be able to make a strong case. SMART goal, thinking about your project, thinking about how you write it, tell that case is really important. And ultimately, when you're thinking about grants, it has to be worth the investment of time, energy, and resources. And if you don't have all three, it may not be worth it. You have to have a likelihood of funding because these funding opportunities, these grants, take a lot of time, and you're going to be giving up something else to do it. And then when you think about grant writing, it's really important to write the grants, but it's also important to be able to manage the grants, because if you can't manage it on the other end, that's a problem. And grant writing and grant management, if you get a grant and you don't manage it well, or there's problems, that will haunt you and you won't get that funding again. And funders talk to one another. So it's really, really important that you have a way to manage the funds, not only to write the funds. So I do want to touch on this. I know this was in some of your other information, but when you think about writing a grant, this is a typical RFP. Now, this is an RFP outline for a federal grant, but if you can write a federal grant, you can write any kind of grant. And that is, you typically will need a cover sheet, some basic information, which usually you do that online. You enter it in a portal, who your organization is, what your nonprofit identification, IEA number is, IEN number, and so on are. Then you put a summary, a project summary, going back to our SMART goal. That's typically what that evolves into, is a project summary. Your project narrative is a much longer description of what you're trying to do. And then you usually, cite your sources where you're drawing things. You'll normally have to talk about your facilities or resources you have available to you for the project. Equipment, if you need equipment, is going to be in there. And then support letters, you will always in grants need support letters. And support letters, sometimes folks think, I just need somebody to say I'm a good organization, I do good things. And sometimes that's appropriate. But oftentimes what they're looking for is, who is going to give you support for this project, and what does that support look like? For example, UADA is going to provide staff time for one full-time person, 5% on this grant to support it. I'm giving my time to support you. I've documented that. What is that worth? How much is that? How does that contribute to the project? That's usually what support letters are. If you're applying for a federal grant, you will need, most likely, support letters from your congressional delegations. And you have to start on those way in advance. Those take time. So as soon as you know you're going to be working on a federal grant, reach out to your congressional office. And then you'll usually need to have a list of CVs and other types of things of people working on the project, a budget, and a budget justification. Those are all really important as you think about the process. I do want you to think about, with grant writing, that grant writing is technical requirements really meets effective communication. Those are really important. And as you think about that, when you put those two things together, you have a successful application. If you think about it, right? You just check the boxes, you do all the technical stuff, great. But you can't tell the story, then what? You're probably not going to be able to get the grant. If you tell a great story, but you don't do the right things, you're not going to get the grant. If you put those things together, voila. I can't guarantee you will get it, but you'll have a much better chance of a successful application. So I want you to think about a couple things. When you're thinking about grant writing, it's really about storytelling. It's about connecting the dots. SMART goals and objectives are really important. It's about being feasible, logical, credible, accountable to what you're saying that you'll do. And these are a couple of the things you're probably going to need. And this is in some of your materials from before, so I won't belabor the point. But things that you need to make sure that you have. And as you're thinking about grant writing, really, these are things you need to think about, right? Where, why, how, what, when, who. Those are all those things there, those bubbles are important. And I'm going to quickly go through this. I'm going to pause. And you can always reach out to me at hgoodman@uada.edu. So this is going to be kind of quick, because we're going to then move into the logic models. I want you to think about, when you're talking about the what, and when you're thinking about your grant, you want to think about what you're trying to accomplish. You're going to think about the priorities for you and for the funder. For the who is, do you have the expertise on your team? Do you have the people to do this work, right? Can you get this done that you want to do it? And how much will it cost to do that? And then, are you able to tell the story of, like, why does this matter? Like SMART goal, right? Why does it matter that you need a freezer for your food pantry? What does that have to do with your ability to serve more people? You have to be able to explain that. And then how is like, how are you going to do it? Like, how is all this going to come together? What are the pieces, right, that are going to come together to allow you to do the work? This is where you detail out what you're going to do. And then the when is your timeline. How are you going to make all this work? And keep in mind that as you're going through, you have to be able to really, you're telling a story. When you're writing a grant, you are incredibly passionate. And the where is the keeping, where you keep everything and where it happens. And so as you are incredibly passionate, you are right, you probably have started this organization or you have put a whole lot of your blood, sweat, and tears into it. It means a lot to you. You've got to get that message out of you onto paper and to a funder. And that passion equates to a plan that they know they can invest in you. No one can do that quite like you because you have the passion. But if that funder doesn't know everything you know, they don't live in your community probably. They don't live in your shoes. So when you think about these 6 W's, or 5W and an H, when you think about that, you have to really think about you're telling a story so that your funder understands what the issue is, why, how your solution matters, when it's going to take place. All these things matter for how you communicate. Okay, rapid fire. That was a quick walkthrough of questions and things you need to think about. And what I'd like for you to be doing at this point in the course is I think you should walk away with an outline of a grant. So take your SMART goal, kind of walk through what I've asked you to do today, and I want you to really think about how does that equate to telling your story? What's your goal? How are you going to do it? Why does it matter? It's what you're going to say in your grant. And then when the right grant comes along, you're ready because you have an outline. Now, and then you just take the details of that grant and you fill it into the outline. Logic models. Why, Dr. Goodman, do I have to do a logic model? I'm writing a grant. Well, a logic model is a way that in a lot of federal grants is something federal funders like. And it is a useful tool to really help you to get it out of here in your brain and get it on paper in a way that it makes sense. And I don't think I said in the beginning of this video, but I was the first executive director of the Arkansas Coalition for Excellence, which is a statewide nonprofit association in Arkansas. I have run a nonprofit. I am a founding member of a national nonprofit board. I have founded small nonprofits as well. And I understand it's not just I'm a professor who learned this stuff in a textbook. I've lived it. And it's so easy. You got it up here, you know it, and you know you need this to keep your doors open, to serve your people, to support your mission, to keep your team employed. But ultimately, while that's important, you have to be able to show your funder how that all equates, right? Because at the end of the day, your funder is investing in you. So a logic model, this is kind of a way to think about a logic model. And I like to start over here with long-term outcomes and back up. And the reason I like that is because it's easier for me. You are welcome to start anywhere on this you want, but for me, I find it easier to dive in on long-term outcomes. So I want you to think about this. We're going to go through an example. Long-term outcomes is what condition do you want to change over time? Then the medium-term outcome is what behavior change do you want to have? Short-term, what attitudes, knowledge, or skills are needed to change the behavior? Target audience is who needs to take the action. Your output is what actions will you take to guide the target audience to take that change? And then what resources do you have? All right, Dr. Goodman, what? I don't get it. Understand. We're going to look at some examples. Again, long-term condition, long-term outcome. What are you trying to change? You got to be changing something. What are you trying to change? And then what behavior needs to happen to make that condition doable? And then how do you change attitudes, knowledge, or skills to get to that behavior change? Who are you trying to impact here? And then what actions will you take to guide it? What resources do you have? Okay, I'm with the Division of Ag. Again, I'm going to use an agricultural example. Let's say that long-term we want socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers to increase operating capital for farm business. That's what we want to do. Okay, so we want the participants in our program to increase their operating capital for farm business. In order to increase their capital, they need to write successful grant proposals. So notice I didn't say they need to get more funding. Yes, they need to get more funding, but I'm focusing in on successful grant proposals because that's the particular piece that's targeted and is focused, right? My short-term outcome of how to help them write successful grant proposals is first, they need to learn where to find grant opportunities. And secondly, they need to demonstrate skills related to grant writing. SMART goals, logic model. Sound familiar? Right? So in order for people to write successful grant proposals, this is what they need to learn. Now, who? The who is my social disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. That's what I'm doing. The outputs of strategies, how do I do all this, right? I'm going to help them write successful grant proposals by offering a training workshop on where to find grant opportunities, how to select a grant opportunity, how to successfully respond to an RFP, and how to manage a grant. And I'm going to do that as a land-grant university with a computer lab. All right, hopefully you're with me. I want you to there's an example of a logic model in your materials. I want you to pull that out. It's got an example and it's got a little grid like this. And I want you to try a logic model. You can pause me if you want. I'm going to hang on for just a minute. You can pause me and come back if you want to. And then I'll restart momentarily. Okay, welcome back. So what we're going to do, you've pulled out your logic model sheet, and I want you to try. I want you to just think about, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your condition? What's your long term of what you want to do? Again, looking at this as an example, let's say you want to increase operating capital for participants in your program. The specific thing you're going to do to help them increase that capital is to write successful grant proposals. In order to successfully write grant proposals, they have to find grant opportunities and they have to demonstrate skills. They are the socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. It could be the participants in your program. It could be children and youth in your program. It could be different things depending on who you're trying to serve. And the specific thing you're going to do is you're going to offer a training workshop. And you do that by virtue of, in my case, a land-grant university and a computer lab. In your case, it might be something different depending on what kind of organization you are. So what does this have to do with evaluation? So anytime you're writing a grant, you have to be able to show that you actually did what you said you were going to do. And I know, again, having been a nonprofit person, or still a nonprofit person, but having been an executive director, that you just know, you see it, you see the change in your people. I get that, but that's not enough for your funders. They have to know, because they have to show that their investment is going somewhere. Now, don't be scared by this. I've taught this a lot. I haven't run anyone off yet. Now, you see this part up here? Does that look familiar? Probably should. This is your long-term outcomes, okay? Your medium-term outcomes, your short-term, your target audience, your outputs or strategies, and your resources. I want you to think about that, right? Same thing we just did. And if you think about that, you're going to pull that down. And you see these down here? These are all things that if you do them and you do them right, you can say those are your accomplishments. So this little grid here I have used in my own work and it's been very helpful. See this right here, long-term outcomes, medium-term outcomes, short-term outcomes, target audience, outputs. Those are all things that are, that's your logic model, okay? Over here to the side, you're basically adding a set of questions. What are you trying to measure? Or what do you want to say at the end of your grant that you did? What do you need to know? Who has the information? How will you get the information? And then how often will you collect it? Okay, hang with me here. If I'm offering a training workshop, what I need to show is how many of those workshops I offered. Because, right, if I say I'm going to do a workshop, I have to show that I did it. So the way that I show that I did the workshop, who's going to know that? Me as the instructor, okay? And then from me, you can gather copies of the agendas that show what I did in the session. And then every time I do a workshop, I gather that information. Now, if I want to know who came, right, I keep track of the number of people that came. I get that from the instructor through sign-in sheets after every workshop. If I want to show that my short-term outcome, that my participants are learning grant opportunities, they're demonstrating grant skills, I do that by what? Asking the participants, the people that participated. I do a survey or an evaluation after each class to get a sense of the people that were in the class and what they learned. And if let's say I want to know my goal is for them to write successful grant proposals. So I keep track of the number of proposals successfully written. The people who are going to know that are the participants, and I might call them quarterly. Now, the reason I would call them quarterly and not monthly is because it takes a while to write a grant. So quarterly allows a check-in. And then my long-term outcomes is kind of on an annual basis. I would find out the amount of grant funding that my participants have received. And I might do that through an anonymous survey because they're probably not going to want to tell me. Or if they do, they don't want it to be tracked for everybody to know. But if you did a survey annually and asked for this information in a survey format, you would have it. Okay, so how do you feel? How are we doing? The benefit of this approach is at the end of the day, if you do this, you've got your evaluation. You tell your funder, I did what I said I was going to do, and here's how I know. You can show attendance. You can show what you did. You can show what people learned and why it matters. Because the matters is that at the end of the day, you were able to help your participants increase their capital. So where do we go from here? Okay, so I shared a lot of information with you. The next step, typically, if you were in one of my workshops, would be budget, and we would talk about budget. And budget, I think when you're thinking about each of these pieces that we've talked about, budget is the next thing that falls out, right? Budget is the thing that when you kind of put all the pieces together and you know what you want to do, how you want to do it, and how you're going to measure it. Your money, your budget, is what do you need to spend in ways that help you accomplish your goal. And there are some specifics to that. Your previous instructor went through budget, so I won't belabor the point. You think about things like staffing, travel, supplies, equipment. Think about the things that are going to enable you to do the work. And with grants, you always have to usually think about matching funds. Matching funds are monies that you can bring to the table for the project, meaning you're not just saying, funder, give me XYZ. You're saying, funder, give me XYZ, and I'm going to already bring this. And remember our participants and our partnerships? That could be some of your match. It doesn't always have to be cash money. It can be time. It can be space. It can be resources. It can be volunteer hours. There's a quantifiable number for volunteer hours. So think about those things. And if you have questions at this point, please reach out. Call me, email me. Again, hgoodman@uada.edu. My cell phone number is 501-804-0679. You are welcome to reach out to me at any time. I do teach grant writing around the state for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. And so if that can be of use to you in any possible way, please come to our workshops around the state. I do want to leave you with a couple of things to think about as you finish your course. As you are writing these grants, one of the things, it's really easy to think, it says exactly what I think it says, right? I wrote this and it looks great. But what you think is on the page may or may not read to someone else the way it reads to you. I find that because I pour my heart and soul into things, I know what it's supposed to say. That doesn't mean that somebody who doesn't know it the way I do will read it that way. So find a friend, find your spouse, your partner, your work colleague, somebody you trust, and let them read it. It's really important. I like to have somebody within who knows the work and somebody outside of it. Give them both a chance to read it because it gives you an opportunity to hear what you need to hear and to look at it from the perspective of what someone's going to look at it when they're reading it, and an external reviewer is going to review it. The other thing is, if you don't get the grant, it's okay. But take that as a learning opportunity. Follow up, contact the program officer or contact for the grant. They want to hear from you. They're people just like you and me. Their job is to help you be successful. In some cases, you'll get a detailed description of what you did and how you could do it better. In other cases, you might get a broad description. Either way, there's some learning points there. So don't be afraid to reach your program officer. And I would say that for anything in the grant writing process, these are people, their job is for you to get that money out the door and for their grantees to be successful. So they want to hear from you. We're not talking about a computer that's processing stuff. We're talking about people. So all throughout the grant writing process, call, reach out, email, and ask questions. Participate on webinars that are available about the grant funding. That's going to make you more successful. If you think about it, if someone's never heard from you or know anything about your project and they get a cold application, they're less likely to understand and really recognize it to the degree that they would with some pointed questions. Polite, appropriate, but pointed questions that you're engaged in the process all the way through. The other thing I want you to think about is management of grants. Again, it's really, 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 really important that when you're writing grants, grant writing is a great tool in your toolbox, but you also have to be able to manage it. And if you can't, there are serious ramifications for not being able to allocate money correctly or not showing that correctly. So please, 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 please take that to heart, that you always want to manage your funds as well as write for them. It's really important. And then I want you to think about, if you are applying for a federal grant, make sure you're registered with sam.gov, sam.gov. There's a process there. And again, if you need help, contact UADA Extension. You can reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction. It's been a pleasure to work with you. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this process and to support you. H. Goodman at uada.edu, 501-804-0679. Best of luck with your process, and we'll see you on the journey. Take good care.